art teacher, Mr. Aguilar, and today I want to go over a quick demo that I'm doing for my class. This project is called the Geo Animal. For this project, you pick any type of animal, reptile, insect, whatever it is that you want, and you pair it with a geometric design as the foundation for your composition. So this was the sketch that I did, and based on the sketch, I went and did a final illustration. Now, I'm not used to drawing like birds and flowers, so when I do something like this, I like to practice. Basically, I'll go through, research a bunch of different flowers. I'm looking for color, I'm looking for shapes, I'm looking for texture. And then I'll just go around and practice drawing various type of flowers or birds, whatever it is that I'm drawing that's new, just so I can get some practice and get a better feel for the shapes and forms. Once I've done my practice, then I took that base illustration and I drew it out to the size that I wanted to. I always do this on another piece of paper, and I'm not really concerned about sketch marks or anything like that because I'm going to transfer this over to a final illustration board. In this case, I transferred it over to a 140-pound hot press watercolor. Hot press watercolor is the slick watercolor paper. It's almost like Bristol board. And the reason I did that was because I was going to ink it, and I'm going to keep my colors largely flat, so I'm not going to do a lot of blending. If I wanted to do a painting where I was going to blend a lot of watercolors, I would have probably gone with a cold press, but you will not get as clean of a line as you would get with Bristol board or watercolor paper. So this is the drawing that I did, and I used a light table to transfer it over. And what I'll be doing for the rest of this video is I'll be inking it, and then I'll be watercoloring it, and that'll take you through the process of this whole illustration.
So hi, this is Mr. Aguilar. I'm going to do a quick voiceover. The first part of the video is a time lapse of me inking it. I'll mainly be using a quill pen. So that is a metal nib that you dip into ink or you drop ink into. I use the nib or the quill simply because the more pressure I add, I can get thicker lines, and the less pressure I add, I can get thinner lines. It gives me much more control over thin and thickness. However, anytime I need to draw like a long straight line, I will use a pen to do that. These inks are waterproof. Again, as always, I would suggest anytime you're using something that says waterproof ink that you test it first to make sure that it is truly waterproof. And I'm not going to talk too much, but I will pop in from time to time as I'm going through the video. One thing to notice, I'm constantly rotating the paper. You never want to fight your hand. You always want to draw or ink or paint in a comfortable hand position. So always make sure that you're rotating your hand, because that's rotating the paper, because that's the one thing you can control. You obviously cannot rotate your hand. So at this point, I'm using a pen and a triangle to draw my straight lines. The triangles are nice because they're clear and they allow you visibility so you can see where all your lines are. Anytime you use a opaque ruler or a metal ruler, you really can't see where you're drawing, so I'd always recommend using either a transparent ruler or using a triangle. And now that I'm done with the outside, I'm going in and inking the bird. And a couple of things about inking. When you're dealing with waterproof ink, it acts as a barrier, so it helps prevent bleeding when you're doing the painting process. You got to make sure though that you're not dumping a lot of water when you're using watercolor onto the paper, because if you put too much liquid, the ink barrier won't work. So I'm beginning to do the watercolor now. I have a few colors that I picked out, and if you notice over to the right hand side, now on the left hand side, I have a test strip. Anytime you're painting or inking or doing anything, you should always have a warm-up sheet, and you should always have a test sheet. And the test sheet is where you can check to see if you like the colors. It's where you can test your ink out. So that one sheet that I have, I used for this entire painting. So anytime I needed to mix colors and I wanted to see if it was the color that I wanted, you're always going to use that test strip. So I always recommend having one of those next to you. And then anytime you take breaks, whether you're inking or painting, you always want to mess around and practice a little bit, warm up on that test strip before getting into it. So every time I'm laying down a color, and I deleted a lot of the scenes, I'm going to that test strip. You're just not going to see it in the video that often. Here's the other important thing about watercolors. They are transparent, not opaque like acrylic or oil. So when you're laying down your colors, you always want to start with your lightest and brightest colors if you're going to be layering. So if I have colors on top of colors, you always want to start with your lightest color first and then add your darker colors on afterwards. And you'll see that in some of the flowers, and then you'll see that when I start the bird. And this flower is a good example. So it's oranges and red oranges. So I'm going to start off with the lightest orange, and then I'll go back over it with a reddish orange to give it a little more depth and volume. Other thing you should always have is a paper towel and a piece of tissue paper, like for blowing your nose. You can wipe off and clean your brushes on it, but you can also lift paint. So if you have any excess, you just want to make sure that you're dabbing with a clean section of the Kleenex or a clean section of the paper towel. One of the reasons you see me jumping around is I want to make sure that thing's dry and my hand's not touching it. So if I paint on one side, I will flip the painting around and I'll start painting on the other side so my hand won't go anywhere near the wet areas. And then I'll also take breaks and let things dry. If you're trying to get it done in a quick fashion, once it's partially dry, you can go over it with a blow dryer to help speed up the drying process. But you do want the colors to set. If you have liquid sitting on top and you use the blow dryer, it'll just blow the paint around. So you want to make sure that it's partially dry before you start using the blow dryer. And here's a good example of what I'm talking about. I started with the yellow base for the feathers, and it has bright yellows and oranges, so I want to start off with that lightest value and then go on top. Same thing with the rest of the feathers on the bird, the blue areas. I started off with like the really light values because you don't want white of the paper, so you want to go through with a really light version of the color you're using. It's also important to have a light base coat if you're going to be adding textural elements on top like I have with the feathers. So basically my approach is lay down my light values, my color scheme for the bird, and then once I have all those light values down, I'll go back over it and start adding my darker values and adding my textures, and you just build up light values, medium values, dark values. And it's good to walk away from time to time so you can come back and reassess, and when the colors dry, they're going to appear differently than when you're applying them down wet. Anytime you put the watercolor down wet, they're going to appear slightly darker than when they dry. And you can see now I'm adding my darkest values, and that's really going to give it depth and more three-dimension in its appearance. So the last thing I did right here is I added a light blue background, and then with the border, I'm going to fill it with gold. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to do it with a marker, if I'm going to do it with paint. So what I went is I put in gold leaf digitally, and I think I'm probably going to do gold leaf on the actual finished product when I get a chance. So there's the sketch, the inked drawing, and here is the finished product.